Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel and welcome back to another video. So normally I don't follow authors that much. It's very rare that I follow like the same author through multiple books, with the exception of Brandon Sanderson, of course. But I've definitely picked up a couple of authors where I've read multiple of their books, and some of them have actually gotten some really high highs and really low lows. So that'd be a fun video to kind of go over some of these authors that definitely gave me some whiplash. And I'm going to go and start with the low-hanging fruit of J.K. Rowling. Obviously, I very much enjoyed Harry Potter. I've talked about it a ton. I'm honestly not doing it on purpose, but Harry Potter just happens to fit in a lot of tags and videos I've done recently. So in case you haven't heard me say it enough, this is the special 20th edition Taiwanese edition. I don't say this to support J.K. Rowling, but the artist did an amazing, incredible job. And if you're a fan of this artwork, then please go check out my other video where I go into all 7 books. I show you them. It's all timestamped, so I know it looks long, but like I go into a lot of detail and these books are awesome. So if you're a fan of book covers and Harry Potter, check it out. But anyways, if you haven't already clicked off because you're tired of me saying that, yeah, obviously I really liked Harry Potter. And your assumption may be that I'm going to talk about The Cursed Child, but I actually never read The Cursed Child, nor would I consider it one of her novels, so I'm not going there. However, I am going here. Or more like I never went here, because I've DNF'd this book probably 2 or 3 times. And this is The Casual Vacancy by J.K. Rowling. I definitely picked this up back in high school. I think when I first saw it, I was like, oh my gosh, if that's the author of Harry Potter, I didn't even know she wrote other books. I know she writes under like some other moniker or whatever, where I think she does a lot of thriller or something like that. I don't know. I didn't look into it. I kind of just thought that maybe I'd like this since I liked Harry Potter. I definitely think it's a really striking cover. I know it's not a lot to it, but anyways, I basically tried reading it like at least twice now, and I just couldn't care less to get into it. I think it's some sort of like small town, like London thriller where I think like someone ends up dying. I don't know if it's like a who did it. I honestly could never get far enough along to find out. Or I don't know if it's just sort of like a character study, because it just goes through all these different characters and their lives. And yeah, I just couldn't care less. And obviously it wasn't anything similar to Harry Potter. Not even just terms of it not being fantasy, but just in terms of like anything. They're like 2 completely different books. So yeah. The next author is Adam Silvera. I first picked up What If It's Us. This is also written by Becky Albertelli, and I really like this. This is a romance where essentially the 2 main characters they actually meet like at this like FedEx store or like post office, and one of them just broke up with his boyfriend, so I think he's like mailing a bunch of his stuff back. The other one I think just moved to town. I really can't remember. But yeah, essentially they have like a meet cute, and then they spend like the next couple of chapters or a good quarter of the book sort of like trying to find each other again, and then they do, and there's like some drama, and I don't know, it was really cute, and I got through it really fast. I thought it was really fun and adorable. And so yeah, Adam Silvera is a male author who writes romance, so I was interested. I already picked up, I think, one other of his books. I think it's like What If We Both Die at the End. I haven't gotten to that one yet. But the next book I did pick up of his was called Infinity Sun. I don't have it anymore because I unhauled it. But this was, from what I remember, was supposed to be like a fantasy story. I didn't have too many fantasy stories with like the main character being a male and also interested in other men. I was really excited for that. I was imagining, even if it was like more on the lighter side, he did write contemporary, so I thought, okay, maybe sort of like a YA fantasy, sure. So Infinity Sun isn't, I wouldn't even really consider it a fantasy. I mean, again, maybe I didn't read into it too much, but essentially it's an urban fantasy, and not even maybe at that. They're more superheroes than like magic or anything fantastical, and it just wasn't that good. It especially even had the fact that the main character is related to phoenixes, like his power set, and I love phoenixes, so it should have had everything for me. But the main character was just such like an unwilling protagonist. I don't know if that's the correct term, but that's what he was. And then his brother had the most annoying role I've ever seen or ever heard of in a book. Essentially, he was like a social media star. And so pretty much what he tries doing is basically just hyping up the hero group or whatever. But he's seriously one of the worst characters I've ever read. So on top of like the main character not being that great, the plot not being that great, like the world building wasn't that great, but then it had like one of the worst secondary characters like I've ever seen. And the sequel is pretty much basically as little spoilers as I can, even though I wouldn't recommend the book, and it's got terrible ratings. But essentially the end of the book, the brother, who's the character I hate, does something really stupid, and then essentially I guess it's killing him in the second one. And so according to the synopsis of the second one, I guess it's the whole second book is everyone trying to essentially save him from his stupid mistake. And I'm like, that sounds like the last thing I'd want to happen. So yeah, that was crazy Whiplash. It was really disappointing that I didn't get what I wanted. And the next author I want to bring up is Elizabeth Lim. I first found her when I read this Reflection, A Twisted Tale. I haven't read any of the other Twisted Tales, if you're not too familiar with what they are. They're essentially just taking like Disney stories and writing a little twist to it. For instance, this one is if Shang, the male love interest in the Disney movie, what if he was actually injured in the Han attack when like the mountain fell down or whatever? What if he was injured and Mulan could actually go to the underworld to save him? So this whole book is essentially her like navigating the underworld, dealing with her stuff, and yeah, it was really good. It was definitely it was basically just a further examination on her struggles with being a woman, trying to be a warrior, just all this other stuff. And yeah, I actually ended up really liking it. And so when I saw this cover and saw it was by that author, I picked up Spin the Dawn. And this was a really bad book in my opinion. It was probably one of my worst books of last year. I had this whole rant review on my blog, on Goodreads, as well as on my channel. So if you're interested, you can check it out, even though it was back when my videos weren't super great quality, but still it's kind of fun to rant. But yeah, I was really disappointed because I really liked this cover. I wanted to keep it on my shelves, but this book was just so terrible. It's essentially like Mulan meets Project Runway, which is ironic because she wrote a Mulan retelling. But not only that, but at the end of this book, one of the challenges she goes through is identical to the one she wrote in Reflection. Because the end of Reflection, basically the underworld tries to trick her by showing her like the ghosts of her family or whatever to keep her trapped in the underworld. And this one does the same thing. So I think it's just a little weird how much she basically wrote this book based off of what she wrote with Reflection, or vice versa. I don't know which one came first, and I don't care to look it up. I essentially had basically written off Elizabeth Lim. I wasn't planning on getting any more of her books, because once I realized that without the whole Mulan element, I don't think Reflection would have been that good, because obviously the nostalgia and the fact that she didn't have to write an entire story because you pick up right where the movie like leaves you. So if you've seen the Disney movie, which I'm sure you have if you're reading Reflection, then a lot of the work has already been done for her. So I kind of was just like, I don't think she's going to be for me. But then I was watching Elliot Brooks, and then she brought up Six Crimson Cranes, written by Elizabeth Lim, and the cover was really beautiful, and the synopsis actually sounds kind of good. So I'm like, crap, I guess I'm going to give her one more shot. So she's got one more shot, Elizabeth Lim. I'm sure your entire fortune is banking on my reads, but so don't waste it. The author after that is actually V.E. Schwab. Contrary to actually everything else I've picked up so far, the first book I read of hers I actually hated, and that was Vicious. Yeah, I know it's a booktube darling. I don't know how. I really didn't like Vicious. I don't know how there's not like anybody else who dislikes it. I mean, honestly, I didn't like either of the characters. I know you're supposed to, but I couldn't even like root for the characters. And I also didn't like how I feel like it's supposed to be very like back and forth, but in the end I feel like one of them definitely completely loses, and I just didn't really like that. And yeah, I didn't like the characters. Also, the audiobook is probably the worst. I usually don't talk about audiobooks or the narrators that much, but this was one of the worst audiobook narrators I've ever seen. He was way too old to play either of the main characters, and he also had to voice like women, and especially little girls. And anytime he did those, it sounded so bad. After that, I was pretty much scared away from V.E. Schwab. I still had like the Darker Shade of Magic, but it was definitely like real low on my list now. I wasn't interested until I met Megan over at Megan's Reading Revelations, and her Discord was doing a read-along for The Invisible Life of Addi LaRue. And I absolutely loved this. I gave this 5 stars. I thought it was a gorgeous read. It was really atmospheric. I think it also helped that not only just the book itself, but when at the time I was reading it, it was like fall time, so the weather was kind of nice and chilly outside. I can remember perfectly just like sitting in my nice comfy chair with the window open and just like reading through this. And yeah, just everything about this book was just like so pretty and beautiful. And I just loved Addi. If you guys don't know, she's essentially cursed in this book, and the way she has to deal with the curse, the way she learns about it, the way she like thrives in spite of it, it's just so amazing. The only thing I didn't like is just the love interest and his like backstory. I was like, whatever, I don't really care about this. But yeah, this book actually really turned me around to V.E. Schwab. So this is so this had the opposite Whiplash effect, and that's always a good sign. And the last author on my list is TJ Klune, and I first heard about him when I picked up The House on the Cerulean Sea. I actually feel kind of a little prideful about this because I know a lot of people like this and knew what this was. I like to think I was one of the first people that picked it up and talked about it. I mean, I guess I have the timestamp of when I did the review and everything, so if you want receipts, yeah, it's no big deal. But still, it's kind of fun, like when you're the first person to kind of discover something, everyone's like, have you heard about this book? And you're like, actually, yes, I have. But anyways, enough gloating. House on the Cerulean Sea was one of my favorite books of last year. It's extremely nostalgic. It really puts me back in that place of elementary school where I feel like you maybe not remember a lot of those books you read during that time, but they were so like sweet and innocent that maybe like the story and plot didn't stick with you, but that message really did. And that's what this felt like. It was really beautiful. The characters in it were amazing. The man's journey, although predictable, was still nice to see. He's like a social worker who goes to this orphanage on like this little cliff on the side of the sea. Let's just briefly talk about how pretty this cover is. He goes to this orphanage and he's essentially supposed to make sure everyone's safe and it's like good to go. And all the kids there are very interesting and have their own little story. So yeah, it's beautiful. It was amazing. It basically put TJ Klune like high on my radar. If you like watch any of my previous videos, I pretty much say I only follow 2 authors now exclusively. That's like Brandon Sanderson and TJ Klune. Even though that's the only book of his that I've read. I know he still has like a pretty big back catalog that I have to get through. But after I read that, I was excited to see that he actually had another book coming out very soon. And that was The Extraordinaries. And when I first heard about this book, I was insanely excited because it was by TJ Klune. It was an MM romance. The main character actually writes fan fiction. And essentially this is all about him falling in love with like a superhero because it's our world, but with superheroes. So that pretty much just sounded like perfect for me. Like that sounded everything I'd want to. He's a writer, interested in like a huge superhero. Sure, sign me up. But as I'm sure you know now, because of the trend of this video, this obviously turned out very badly. Very, very badly. This was definitely this was probably my most disappointing book of last year because I had such high hopes for it. So I'm always looking for really good MM romances that are not pure contemporary. So I was super excited for this one and I trusted TJ Klune. But honestly, like this just didn't work. It probably had the worst case of the miscommunication trope I've ever seen. The character is so annoying and dumb. And I basically I did finish it, but I guess you could probably technically call it a DNF because I just started skimming it. It was like ridiculous. I think only about halfway something finally starts happening and I just couldn't care anymore. And like I skimmed it and got to the end and I still didn't care. So yeah, I'm really sad to be unhauling this one, but I still really like TJ Klune and he's still an author that I'm going to continue to buy from. And I know his next book, I can't remember the title, but I'll post a picture somewhere here, obviously. This looks and sounds really good. It seems really reminiscent of The House on the Cerulean Sea, so I hope it has that same vibe. But yeah, that's it. That is my list of authors that gave me Whiplash. If you like any of these authors or dislike any of them, let me know down below. Also, of course, comment any authors that gave you Whiplash and what books gave those to you. And yeah, that's going to be it for me, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you all next time. Bye now.